Today's conversation is about this, that our personal character change begins with what we're willing to surrender and continues by what we're willing to adopt. So it begins with what we're willing to surrender, and it continues by what we're willing to adopt. So let me kind of break this down. And this is, how can I say, this is kind of one of those, how can I say this? Sometimes you hear me say things like, yeah, that didn't get much press. This is one of those things. We all know it kind of experientially, or we have a hunch about it experientially or anecdotally, but it doesn't get very formalized very often. And so what I want to do is kind of put some formalization to it. I want to put names and words to some of the stuff that we all experience. Okay. So I think about this from the standpoint of the beginning of the process. And when I say the beginning, I mean maybe at discovery and disclosure, maybe 2 years removed from discovery and disclosure. I don't know where that starting point is for you, but somewhere there's an early season of recovery and that beginning season of recovery. And the reason that I'm delineated that way is because a lot of times we sort of intrinsically say, or almost assumptively say, that discovery is the start of recovery, or disclosure is the start of recovery. And for a lot of people it is. And for some people it's just not. It's like, okay, there's disclosure and discovery and all that stuff, and then 2 years later they actually start recovery, right? So wherever the beginning is characterized by what we're willing to surrender. That's what starts the process. And for a lot of guys, this is a high hurdle in the beginning, is to come to terms with what I am going to have to willingly let go of. What I'm going to have to willingly let go of. And so let's talk about how that kind of works, and what that looks like. Sometimes too, I think, this is my bias and opinion, sometimes I think there is a misnomer. I got a sneeze coming. And usually where there's one, there's three. I think this is a little bit of a misnomer in the recovery world. Sometimes what we sort of portray, and I think I'm guilty of this sometimes too, what we portray is like when you finally hit bottom, when you finally, and for some people, we got to hit bottom and bounce a few times before it really takes. When you finally hit that place, when you finally come clean, you're finally discovered, the truth is out, you're onward and upward, there's this like misnomer that, and maybe unintended thing that gets delivered that says, now, because that was bad, now what you're going to experience is good. Like, now that you're out of the dark, out of hiding, out of your addiction, out of whatever that is that you were living, like, now you're actually going to experience a fullness of life, like John 10:10 type stuff. And that's not true. Well, I shouldn't say that unequivocally. For some people, it seems to be true. That wasn't true in my story, and that's not true for most guys that I am around. Actually, then it gets really hard. Once all that happens and you're out of it, then it's like the real work begins. And that real work on the front end is usually things that we're having to let go of, or if we're not willing to let go, it's things that we feel like are getting taken from us. Okay, so let's talk through kind of what that looks like as a starting point. And there's a whole lot that we could put under the banner of surrender. I'm just going to name a few that are very, very common in the process. Okay, let's start with privileges. I never know if there's a D in there or not, or entitlements. And closely related to that is autonomy and privacy. These are things that have to be surrendered in the beginning of the process. It's no surprise, probably, that these are also things that have to be surrendered whenever we sign up for life with someone. Like marriage requires that both parties surrender privileges, entitlements, autonomy, and privacy. We have to figure out now in marriage, what does it look like to be autonomous but integrated with someone, to have privacy but not secrets, to have privileges but not entitlements, and not privileges that step on the toes of the person that I'm with. Right? There's this for some of us, we never surrendered this in the beginning of our marriages. And now in recovery, we're faced with really doing it for the first time. Two never really became one. They did on paper, they did theologically, but in lived reality, two never became one. Okay? So in the beginning of the process, for a lot of guys, surrender. What does this mean? What does this look like? This looks like your phone and your journal and your gym bag aren't private anymore. Your phone records and your text, and it's not private anymore. You can't come and go as you please. You can't do the things that you were doing before in terms of privileges and entitlements. You can't. Those things have to be surrendered in the beginning of the process. I think about autonomy. For some of us in our relationships, we have had a life passenger. And I'm not trying to be demeaning here. What I mean is for some of us, speaking for husbands, we've done life with the person that shares our last name as our passenger, as we're going wherever we want, however fast we want or slow we want, and through whatever detours we want. That person has kind of felt like they've been along for the ride. As opposed to we actually are navigating together where we're going in life. And there's an autonomy in that. And part of early recovery for some of us is going, I don't drive very well. Maybe I need to get in the back. Maybe I need to get in the back seat for a minute and let somebody else just completely drive and not be a backseat driver either. But there's this sense of autonomy that we have to surrender. And I think for some of us, early recovery, let me say that differently. I think for some of us, we're stunted in recovery by these three things. Our recovery can never really get off the ground and get going because we're unwilling to surrender these things. Now, there's more on the list I'm going to talk about, and we can all find parts of ourselves in some of them, but these are the big ticket ones that I think stunt people's recovery. Again, regardless of where the timeline is, okay? The other thing on entitlements, let me just say that real quick. The other thing on entitlements is there's some things, and it's unique for everyone, who we have in our mind. I'm speaking for husbands here. We have in our mind that this is a guarantee. It's a lock. It's an absolute. It's a non-negotiable. It's a necessity. Find another word that fits synonymously. It maybe starts with an N. Something that we kind of go into and live out the relationship with as an absolute. That's usually rooted in vows, by the way. It might have vows to do with money, with conflict, with parenting, with vacationing, with whatever it is, right? That's usually rooted in vows. And it's really hard to surrender an entitlement that is rooted in a vow. Because remember, and we've talked about this before, vows are the promises that we make to ourselves, to God and to others sometimes, the promises that we make to ourselves to protect ourselves. It's the insulating factor that we have often early on. It's an insulating factor that we have on our heart. It's a promise that we swear that we'll never do or always do, or we won't be involved with, or we will be involved with, or our marriage will look like or won't look like, or it's a promise that we make to ourselves to protect ourselves that at the time when we made the vow, we needed it. And it was functional at, let's say, 11. But at 41 or 61, let's just say, it's now dysfunctional. We don't need it anymore, but we still operate out of it, and it hurts us and the people closest to us. So the surrender part of this is really hard when something is rooted in a vow. Okay, these are the kind of big ticket three that I see that often stunt people's process early on. Okay, let's keep going. What else? Reputation. That's another one that slows people down. Surrendering reputation. It's probably going to be something that you have to let go of. How people view you and what they think about you. This is especially true when we see people who are really afraid for anyone else to find out. Sometimes that's rooted in protecting the kids, and that's so valid. Oftentimes, though, for husbands, I'm speaking here, there's an element of like, I don't want anyone else to know what I'm going through. And it's not to protect the kids or my wife's reputation. It's to protect my reputation because I'm afraid it will cost me my fill in the blank. And at some point, you will be faced with the tug of war of, am I willing to surrender in order to have recovery, or am I going to hang on in order to have my reputation? And they will be mutually exclusive at some point for most people. Okay, so reputation is a popular one, if you will. We'll call it that. Let's keep going. False identities. This is something that's got to be surrendered. We all have these false identities that we walk around with. Sometimes they're born out of some of the natural personality traits that we have. Sometimes they're born out of a good place and a gifting, and sometimes they're born out of a deep insecurity that we're trying to shore up, right? Maybe your false identity is that you're the funny guy, and you're the one that keeps everybody laughing. And we talked about this a few weeks ago. Maybe you're you got the perma smile on, and you're the mayor, and you glad hand everybody, make everybody feel at home. Maybe you're the money guy, and the way that your false identity shows up is by throwing your money around. There's nothing that's out of reach for me and for y'all, and drinks are all on me and whatever, right? So false identity is something that we have to let go of. Again, really hard. It's a surrender thing. It's really difficult because in so many ways those false identities do insulate us and protect our hearts in a way. They go back to those things I just mentioned, the funny guy and the mayor and the money guy. In so many ways, those keep us significant. In so many ways, they keep us with agency. In so many ways, they keep us with competence. Like they're protective to our hearts and to our sense of selves. So to surrender those can sometimes feel like we're absolutely losing ourselves. And for some of us, our recovery requires that we're really losing a lot of ourselves. But in the end, we're not really losing our true selves. We're losing the false selves. It just feels like our true selves, okay? Let's keep going. That's a big one. Money. We got to surrender money. For some of us, it's no big deal. Meaning it doesn't. Our income doesn't matter. We're going to do and invest whatever we have to do in order to get healthy. And money is an identity thing, and it's not a thing. For some of us, money is a bigger deal. There's some identity in it. There's some security in it. There's a thing with it, and that's something that for some of us, there's an early surrender in the process with that. By the way, we'll talk about this in a second. I'll draw you a handy little graph that I kind of envision how this works. It's not one and done either. So don't misunderstand. I'm not saying you surrender your privacy and you're done. Never have to do that again. No, it's not one and done. This is an ongoing thing, okay? Time. This is another one of those hard ones. Right? For some of us, it's I'm not willing to surrender the time that I give to work, to my hobbies, I'm not going to pick on pickleball, to ministry, to whatever, fill in the blank. Time is usually one of those things that's going to have to be surrendered in the beginning. Okay? Career, another hard one. For some people, you're never going to find the recovery that you're looking for personally and relationally until you surrender the career. Because the career has way too many tentacles in you. It's got tentacles that are connected to your affair partner. It's got tentacles connected to your identity, to your income, which is another part of your identity, to the sense of who you are, because you're not just you, you're Dr. You, or Esquire or whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm using those two and picking on those two, but you could be whatever you are. It's not about necessarily the amount of money you make. It's the way that you take that on as your identity and the thing that shores you up. So for some of us, there's a career that we got to surrender. A couple other easy ones. I say easy to name, hard to do. Comfort or peace. Surrendering comfort or peace. For some of us, that's a really difficult thing, because what we want so desperately. And by the way, when you are in that boat where you're like, actually, that's something I desperately want, is comfort and peace. Usually that's rooted in the kid stuff. That's rooted in root work. Okay? Usually there's a kid in there that's going, I just want peace. Peace from the anxiety, peace from the fear, peace from the conflict, peace from the anger, peace from the insecurity, whatever it is. There's a sense of longing for peace. Usually that's got kid stuff rooted in it. Okay? And then lastly is, I'll just put generically, values. Recovery requires a surrendering of some values, some value system. Okay? I don't know what those are at your house. I don't know what those are at your house. For some people, the values center around, back to some of these things, which are oftentimes entitlements that are rooted about, the values that you really deeply hold are maybe around equanimity. Marriage is a 50-50 deal. And I would argue that it's not. Forget betrayal. It has nothing to do with betrayal, but that's a whole different conversation and a different theology conversation. But, maybe there's something around values and equanimity. Maybe there's something around values and roles in a relationship. Maybe there's something around values and faith journey. I don't know what it is at your house. But these are common things that we see people struggling to surrender as recovery is really taking hold, as recovery is really starting to happen. Okay? Again, everyone on here could add 3 or 4 more, and we could have a list of 100 of them. This is an easy start, if you will. Okay? So surrender. That's what starts the process, is letting go of things. But what really makes the process continue is what we're willing to adopt. What we're willing to adopt. What we're willing to add back and put on, because we've been taking this other stuff off. Okay? And so I want to talk about some of the things that we look at in adoption. Okay? This isn't like, it's the opposite of the other list. It's not that. But some of these things overlap, like new values. Some of us, again, doesn't get a lot of press. We're actually really scared to take on new values. It's really uncomfortable to think about allowing ourselves to believe differently and value something differently than we have for all of our life. Whether you're 27 or 67, it doesn't matter. Similar to that is new beliefs. Like there's an adoption of a new value system as well as a new belief system that has to go into recovery if it's going to continue. And listen, by the way, that didn't have to be what Jason believes. Those don't have to be Jason's values. Right? Sometimes people get hung up going, you're just trying to make me a mini you, right? I can be covert narcissist sometimes. That's not what we're after. That's not what we're after. What I would submit, though, is in order for your recovery to continue onward and upward in the right direction, you will have to adopt some new values and new beliefs about yourself, about marriage, about her, new values about what's important in your life. So let me just give you a quick example. If your old value is being a breadwinner, I'm making this up. This isn't like, just roll with me. Let's say your old value is being a breadwinner, and you kind of have some stereotyped roles around that and what that should look like. And it's predicated on some of what you saw or didn't see back in the day. And there's some stuff there around your values and what you believe, again, a husband's role and a wife's role should look like. Okay? You've got some of that going on. And then you walk into recovery. There might be a place in early recovery where you're having to jettison those things and start to adopt some new values and beliefs. Maybe your new value is intimacy, I'm making it up again, over provision. That's an O. Provision? Provision. Providing. You get what I'm saying? Like maybe you've got to, maybe part of your process will be to internalize a new value that says, I value intimacy over provision. I value coming home and having a chance to connect more than staying the extra hour to get the next thing done and get that much closer to the quota and whatever it is, or that much closer to the raise or the promotion or the whatever, right? You're adopting some new values, and maybe there's some new beliefs that go along with that. That maybe there's something about what God honors, which leads to, for some of us, some new theology going along with our recovery. Maybe part of what has to happen is that you've got to let go of the beliefs and theology that your worth and value and your sufficiency as a husband is rooted primarily in your financial provision, and maybe start get some rewiring and new theology and going, maybe as important or more important even is your emotional provision. It's important for you to provide as much emotionally as it is financially. Again, I'm making it up, I'm not aiming this at anybody. There's some new stuff that you're going to have to adopt and take on, and some old stuff that you got to let go of. And again, this isn't necessarily simultaneously, although I guess it could be technically simultaneously. But what happens a lot of times is this in the beginning, and then that happens less and less, and there's more and more adoption. Okay? Let's keep going. New community. So for some of us, the beginning is surrendering old friendships. Your golfing buddy, your longtime friend, who's really bad for your mental health. Actually bad for your relational health too. There's some new community that you're going to have to develop. This can actually sort of be this can backfire, because sometimes what people will do is they'll jettison their old community, and what they'll adopt and live into as a new community is purely an unhealthy recovery community. So I've seen people do this a lot over the years. Is like, okay, I don't hang out. They don't hang out with the people they used to hang out with, to go where they used to go, and that kind of thing, with the same people after work and happy hour and blah blah blah, and on the golf course, whatever. But now who they hang out with is an unhealthy recovery community. They go to multiple groups a week where they hang out with people who aren't really serious about recovery and don't seem to make change. And now you're in an equally unhealthy community. That was dysfunctional one way. This is dysfunctional a different way. And I'm not saying judgmentally like they're jerks, don't hang out. I'm just saying like you birds of a feather flock together, right? There's a new community that you'll have to take on. And for some people, that adoption is really hard. The surrender of the old and the adoption of the new is really hard. Because for some of us, there's an old series of judgments that go with that community. Like, I'm making stuff up here, but it's like your only framework for somebody who's Christian is the television evangelist that you would see on TV, and that's the last person you want to be. And so to be a church guy feels like a real stretch. And you'll have to let go of some things and adopt some things in community to find who you are as a church guy, or as a Christian, or as, you see where I'm going. Okay? So new community becomes a part of that. And by the way, side note on that, a little bit of a soapbox, that for some of us, in order to get to where God is calling us to go, in order to become who God is calling us to be, it's going to require a change of community. And for some of us, that means a change of neighborhood. And for some of us, a change of city. And for some of us, a change of county. And for some of us, a change of state. And for some of us, a change of country. There are some people who really, when you are living out who God is really calling you to be, you will find yourself on another continent. And what you will have let go of is a bunch of things over here, surrendered over there, and what you'll live into and adopt will center more around your true identity and calling. Okay? Not like this week. This isn't like drop everything and run to Zimbabwe. That's not what I'm saying. Say big picture and long run. Okay, new community. New routines. Adoption, new routines. Listen, for some of us, we go over here. Privileges, autonomy. We go, I go to the gym or I run. This is what I do. 4 days a week in the morning. It's just what I do. I don't do that personally. I'd like to do it more, but you get the picture. Like, that's just what I do. And I have for a long time, like for 20 years, since back when I enlisted or whatever. There's some things where it's like, that's just the autonomy that I have and the privilege that I have. It's just what I do. And for some of us, we have to let go of that stuff and surrender it and go, I need new routines. And what we'll start to conceptualize is things like, that's not bad, or what I just described isn't bad or wrong. But at your house, when you leave in the morning 4 mornings a week to go to the gym workout, what you're actually doing is disintegrating as you drive your car down the driveway. There's a relational disintegration that is happening. I'm not saying that's true for everyone all the time. I'm saying maybe in your story. And a new routine looks like I get up and I sit at the kitchen table and get in the Word and wait for her to wake up. And so as the first thing that happens between us in the morning before the day takes off is I look her in the eyes and go, I'm glad to see you, and good morning. And is there anything we need to talk about from last night? And you're changing this dynamic of disintegration into integration based on new values, because now you value intimacy, and new routines. And it's hard to let go of. I've been doing the same thing for like 20 years. It's just what I do. And now I need to do something different. Okay? There are new routines. What you will find for people who have experienced redemptive recovery is that, hands down, those people have new routines. They just do. Than they did when they lived their other life. Okay? So, new routines, new community, new values, new belief, new focus. New focus. I'll tell you where I see this show up is what people were, I'm speaking for husbands here, where a focus was being driven towards something that is vocational oriented, whether that's ministry, whether that's business, whether that's their profession. Like, there's a vocational orientation that the focus shifts off of that. It doesn't go away. It doesn't become unimportant. The focus shifts into a relational orientation. You'll see people who, I'm less concerned about my career and more concerned about my relationship with my adult son. I'm less concerned about the church as a pastor and more concerned about my house as a husband. And you'll see this, there's almost like a shift away from a vocational thing to a relational thing. That's very, very common. There's a shift in focus. There's a shift in focus. And there's an adoption of a new focus. Man, my nose is running like crazy now. There's an adoption of a new focus. This is it's a telltale sign of the reality of recovery work, by the way, bonus. When we see, I'll speak for myself, when I see someone who in recovery continues with whatever their focus was pre-recovery, and they're trying to somehow look at their, keep their focus on that thing. Let's just call it retirement or financial security. Like, that's the prize, and my eyes on the prize, and that's what I'm going after, and that's my focus. And then everything gets disrupted with disclosure and discovery and all the stuff, and a wife finally reaches a point, puts her foot down, and says, I can't do this anymore. And a husband goes, okay, I can do recovery too. I mean, I can do this stuff over here. And you want me to do? Okay, I'll do that. You want me to do redemptive living stuff? Okay, I'll do that over here. And they're trying to do all of these things but their eyes are still planted firmly over there. Their focus never really comes up. There are wives on this call who you're going, that's my husband. Like, I get his attention for a minute on whatever the fire is that we have to fight in recovery or with our kids or with our whatever. But then it's right back to that. You'll have to adopt a new focus. You'll have to surrender an old focus, and you'll have to adopt a new focus. Okay? So, conceptually, almost done. Conceptually, let's use another color just for fun, and because we have new markers. Yay! This is kind of how I envision this, and this, I don't know, this is anecdotal and kind of out of my brain, and so I don't know that it's necessarily scientific. Actually, I know it's not scientific. I kind of picture this like if this were adoption. If I think of it graphically, and this were the other way around. This is surrender. And this is adoption. Let's do adoption there. Let's do surrender over here. Like, over time, we think about beginning recovery and ongoing recovery. Beginning recovery, so this is kind of like from day zero, whatever day zero means at y'all's house. It's kind of like mostly characterized by surrender. And there's a little bit of adoption. And there's a lot of surrender and a little bit of adoption. And a lot of surrender, a little bit of adoption. And then a little less surrender, and a little more adoption. A little less surrender, and a little more adoption. A little less surrender, and a little more adoption. And less surrender, more adoption. And it kind of starts to look like this. Conceptually, the beginning, and I think about, again, this is just how it's crazy in my brain sometimes. The beginning of the process is walking into a lot of walls. I'm not trying to make it dramatic. I'm not trying to make it pitiful. It's not where I'm going. I'm speaking for husbands here. You just hit a lot of walls. It's like you just keep running into a wall of something that you're required to surrender. At least that was my experience. It's like, wham, I can't be around that guy anymore. Like, it's just not healthy to be around him. And in my case, I was talking about a particular boss. Like, wham, just running that wall. And then there's like, okay, I'm going to let go of that, and I'm going to like adopt something new. And it's sometimes you don't even know what you're adopting. You just know what you're letting go of. And then there's wham, like mountain biking. I'm speaking in my world, like mountain biking, gotta let go of that. And that hurt, and it's silly and stupid and ridiculous today, but at the time it was a huge deal, right? And it's like, and then, okay, let's keep going, wham, and then you hit something else, and it's like this, again, please hear me, wives, this isn't victim or pitiful. It's just a real experience, like you just keep hitting these walls. And as you move through recovery, the beginning just has a lot of surrender in it, all these things. And then as you move through those surrenders, you start with more, you start getting more adoption, you start engaging more adoption, and then as you're engaging the adoption, whatever it is you're adopting, there's like the cement has to dry on it. So you kind of like adopt a new belief system about something. Let's just say that God honors emotional provision as much as financial provision, again, hypothetically. And that's got to settle and sit and grow, and like the cement has to dry on that. And then you hit a place where it's not as much of a wham, it's more like a stumble, a trip, and it's like, okay, there's something else to surrender. There's something else that God's wanting me to let go of. And then you have another one of those moments. And then you go, and it starts to spread out where it's like as recovery goes on, you're less often finding yourself having to let go of something and more consistently adopting and letting the cement dry on the adoption. Okay? I think about this kind of, I know there's context and some contextual stuff and probably a biblical hermeneutic that I'm completely missing here. But I kind of think about this relative to the rich young ruler, where he's going, hey, I'm rocking it over here. What do I need to do? And Jesus is like, well, keep the commandments. I know I am keeping the commandments. What do I need to do? And Jesus is like, just sell everything you have and give it to the poor and come to me. And I think in that moment, he was saying, hey, just surrender. Surrender the security of your financial. And I think there's even one of the verses, or that particular verse says something like, it was hard because he had a lot. I mean, like there was a lot to let go of. And some of us, that's where we're living. Like there's a lot of false identity to let go of. There's a lot of entitlement to let go of. Like it's hard. Who in the hell will I be if I don't have that? For some of us. And then I think about that rich young ruler story. I'm like, if he had done that, given to the poor, and then gone to follow Jesus, what might he have started to adopt? Like, what might he have started to take on and find in himself and find out about God? And what would have become of him if he had taken that leap? Right? I don't know. The Bible didn't say. Although I've heard some people hypothesize that there's something scripturally about, like, at some point he came back. He did make the decision to come back. I don't know. It's beyond my very webinar. So I think of it like this. And just this idea that early surrender, that's kind of like what drives change. But at some point, there's a whole lot less surrender and more about adoption. One of the worst places, I promise I'm almost done, one of the worst places that I see guys get stuck, let's use red because red's bad. One of the worst places that I see guys get stuck is about right here. Where a husband goes, speaking for men here, where a husband goes, I don't hang out with my golf buddies anymore. I'm not putting away as much money for retirement. I don't come and go as I please. I stopped going to the gym, can't you tell? And there's all the stuff that I've lost, but they've really failed to adopt. Fail's the wrong word. They've been unwilling or unable to see what God is calling them to adopt. So there's been a lot of surrender, but very little adoption. And this space right here starts to get very victim-y, and it also starts to get very blamey. For a lot of husbands that are stuck there, they're going, okay, my life isn't what it used to be, and it looks different than it used to look. And what they're saying is that I don't do all the things I used to do. I've let go of a lot of the things that I used to hang on to, but I haven't lived into something new. And I'm really stuck at the whim of whatever the next thing my wife feels like I need to do is. There's almost like this external locus of control that says, I've given up the things I've given up. And usually the surrender in these spaces, somebody who's stuck here, is usually a lot of the surrender leading to this point was reluctant. A lot of the surrender was reluctant. Usually somebody who's stuck here didn't want to get rid of some of this stuff anyway. Okay? So then they land here and they go, now I've got none of the stuff I used to have. Our relationship is in the toilet and I have nothing to show for it. So now what? Is this all there is? Is this all the future's going to hold? Because this isn't worth it. It's a terrible place to be stuck. Terrible place to be stuck. And typically the way that I see men get out of that is to, one, look retroactively and see, okay, how is surrender something that God was calling you to anyway? The voice that he used happened to be your wife's or your coach's, right? And then to look forward at, okay, what do I need to adopt? What is God calling me to adopt? What is the What new values, new beliefs, new theology, new community, new routines, new focus do I need to adopt in order to move towards, and let's not move this, or let's not forget this, in order to become who he's calling me to be. And the reason I'm writing that very specifically, is because I'm not saying to save my marriage. Super important. Big fan of marriages, especially saved ones, because it's not that. What do I need to do? What do I need to adopt in order to get her off my case? It's not what we're saying. What do I need to adopt in order to get off Jason's payroll? That's not what I'm saying. Or Jason off my payroll. You get the point. It's what do I need to adopt to become who he's calling me to be? Because when you're moving in that direction, you're going to start to see the things you need to take hold of. And it's not just for the benefit, but you will start to experience the benefit of taking hold of those things. Like this area over here, and if we kind of think about the diagram, everything between here, that is really wonky. What is going on with me? Everything to this point is loss. For a lot of us, if we've done that reluctantly, all we can see is loss. We don't really see anything gained. Especially if our marriage feels like it's worse than it was. And so when you shift that focus then to becoming who God is calling me to be and adopting some of the new things, you start to somewhere over here start to feel gain. And again, we're not doing it expressly for that purpose. It's not about just the ends, right? But there's something really sweet that happens when you start to see like, oh, life is actually better when I think about this stuff this way, not the old way. Life is actually better when my wife is actually happy to see me when she walks into the kitchen in the morning and sees me sitting there doing my devotional because I want to be doing my devotional, instead of walking in and seeing the look of disappointment on her face when I walk in from the gym.